ghouls and fiends, welcome once again to another edition of the Ministry of Horror. I'm, as per usual, your host, Tez, and today, at the time of recording and at the time of release, it is Friday the 13th. Which means only one thing: we can't have an episode dropping. And it's a recorded week, and I need to have my evening. I need to have my evening free, so it's not a live stream week, but it's a recording week. So we got to talk Friday the 13th. Now, if you look into the archives, we do have an episode where I discuss. I can't remember if I rank. There was a period where I was ranking film series. Can't remember if that was the case then, but there was a show where we talked about the Friday the 13th films, and I think it was around the time when I finally got around to watching Friday the 13th Part 9, Jason Goes to Hell, which surprisingly I actually kind of enjoyed. It's the one that everyone seems to universally hate. I went in it with just no expectations, just I think expecting the worst, and actually thought, you know what? Not a traditional Friday the 13th film, but it's okay. It's got some cool moments in it. We're not talking about that today. What we are going to be discussing is we have a new film to review a bit later on, which is the new AI sexy thriller, Subservience, starring Megan Fox. Comes out wide release today. Digital is in. I should have that information available. It's available today, September 13th, and it's on TVOD from September 20th. So been lucky enough to get an advanced screener for that. We're going to be talking about that a bit later on, reviewing that. But we have a chock-a-block edition of retro reviews. I'm making up for some of the episodes where I've maybe not done a retro review, or they've not been, maybe some of the heavy hitters. Although we are looking to get a bit of a mixture on here. And I should do a retro review at some point of Session 9 after I picked up the Second Sight box set not too long ago. And that's an incredible film. But on today's edition of the Ministry of Horror, after discussing Subservience, we will be reviewing Hellraiser Bloodline. And I should mention that that's kind of starting a theme for the remainder of the retro reviews, in that I don't know what it was this week. I fancied revisiting films that I've seen, but not for a very long time, and because I wasn't that fussed with it when I first watched it. So it's a retro review bonanza, but it's also a revisionist approach, a reevaluation of my prior thoughts and feelings on some of these films. No, they're not ones that I've reviewed on the show previously, but they're ones that I have previously kind of just watched and gone, not that good, or whatever. I've had a reason for not really holding it in very high regard. So we are going to be discussing Hellraiser Bloodline, giving a review of that. Then there are three, I almost put four fingers up, three Friday the 13th films that we are going to be reviewing. I'm going to be reviewing the remake from 2009, I believe. I'm going to be reviewing Part 5, which I remember hating when I first watched it, and also Part 7. We'll talk. It looks like I'm jumping around in the timeline and whatnot, but there is a reason for that. It ties into what I'd mentioned a moment ago. But that's what we're going to be reviewing a bit later on. Now, I'm not planning on doing a super long show, which is crazy because we've got 5 films to review. But we're going to just jump straight into it. We're going to get on with the news in just a moment. In terms of our usual catch up, where we are, there's not been any kind of horror related gaming. I think this week has been a killer. I had to throw that in there. It's been a killer week with work, with accountancy-based stuff outside of work. It's been very heavy going and very, very stressful. So when I have done any sort of gaming, I've kind of just had my brain switched off. I picked up 2 games on this PlayStation sale at the start of the week because they were dirt cheap. I picked up I'm So Glad You're Here, I think that's what it's called, the Brummie or Yorkshire cartoony based video game, which is very, I think it's the same makers who did Untitled Goose Game, I'm not too sure. I've had a great time when I've sort of dipped into playing that. not horror related. But I did also pick up, because I've been looking at it for a little while, and apparently it's very good. I don't know if it's very good yet because I'm stuck already. I picked up Aliens Dark Descent, which I'm still on an Alien high. I'm still reading God, not Sea of Sorrow, the book before that. Not River of Pain, I think that's the third book. Out of the Shadows, maybe? Something like that. There's a trilogy of books. I'm still reading the first one. I've read an Aliens graphic novel recently. Very much still on a high from Romulus. Thoroughly enjoyed that film. We so back. But that had then got me looking at the Alien games. So we picked up Isolation a couple of weeks ago. We streamed a bit. I will stream more, but like I say, my evenings have kind of been brain shut off. Don't want to talk, don't want to do anything. Just, especially the last few days. So, but I picked up Dark Descent. As soon as I started it, it says, this game is very difficult. And I thought, oh, for fuck's sake. No. And this is even after selecting easy mode, because I think might have even been novice mode, because I know that it's a difficult game. I'm going to struggle. I can if I put my mind to it, but I don't often put my mind to it or want to put my mind to it. So I'm in the prologue section, and I still keep getting killed by the first xenomorph. I need to just try a different approach. I keep doing the same approach every single time, but the xenomorph keeps catching me. So I haven't even got to the point of getting colonial marines and going around and shooting up stuff. I will keep trying on it, though. I'm not going to just waste £10, whatever it was. But yeah, it's been a heavy going week. So, but in the middle of that, I have been able to get a few retro films reviewed, and when I've been doing that, I have had a great time. I'm not going to spoil my scores or anything just yet, because I don't really know what scores I'm going to give until I talk about them. But the point kind of being, when you're struggling, when you're having moments that are tough, make time for the things you enjoy, and in this instance is horror. Which does remind me, we are rapidly approaching Halloween. I put in the Discord a little while ago the 31 days of Halloween, 31 days of scares, whatever it is. I can't remember the company organization that release every year these charts. I think it might be Nightmare on Film Street or something like that. But it's on Twitter. I've shared it from there, so it's nothing I've made. But it's this template for the 31 days of October, the 31 days of Halloween, different types or genres or directors or actors or actresses of horror films, like a guide to watch a film a day. I did really well the first year I tried it 2 years ago. Last year it was in the midst of me moving house. It just wasn't possible. I tried, it just wasn't possible. This year I feel I have my horror groove in terms of how and when to squeeze in a horror film, how to make it possible. And there are going to be times where I just don't have time. It's just not possible. So I'm going to have to double up or triple up on another day. But I'm determined to do that again this year, because whilst it was tough the first year, I did really enjoy finding some undiscovered, for me anyway, gems. But without further ado, I'm rambling on too much. Enjoy horror. Make sure you make time for the things that you enjoy doing. But we're going to get straight into the horror news. This is the news.
This is God.
You hang up on me again, I'll cut you like a fish, understand?
Sorry, I just got some influx of messages, and I have no idea what the hell they're going on about. So, as with all the horror news, this comes from bloodydisgusting.com. Be sure to check out their website, their X account, for your latest horror news and tidbits. And a few things that have popped up recently that have caught my attention. There's going to be a new Creep film. That's not part of this horror news, but it's something that's been announced via Bloody Disgusting. A new Creep film. There's been 2 films. They're both on Netflix in the UK, at least. They're decent. I don't know what it is about the actor, writer, director, Mark Duplass, who I know from a comedy series called The League. I don't know what it is that I just don't really, I don't know. I think his character's quite smarmy in The League, and because of that, I then have this bias where I don't really like him. I don't know what it is. It's one of those things where you're just like, oh god. But they are actually pretty good films. There's a new film of that coming out, so that's something I heard about from Blood Disgusting. Anyway, I don't think this factors into the news. Might be, I don't know. But this is from Blood Disgusting. John Squire's write up: the 8 new horror movies being released today, Friday the 13th. So first up, In a Violent Nature is the next best thing to a new Friday the 13th movie. A unique slasher told from the perspective of the Jason-like killer, and it's now streaming on Shudder. In the UK as well, I believe. In the film, when a locket is removed from a collapsed fire tower in the woods that entombs the rotting corpse of Johnny, a vengeful spirit spurred on by a horrific 60-year-old crime, his body is resurrected and becomes hellbent on retrieving it. The undead golem hones in on a group of vacationing teens responsible for the theft and proceeds to methodically slaughter them one by one in his mission to get it back, along with anyone in his way. Chris Nash wrote and directed In a Violent Nature. Ry Barrett, Andrea Pavlovich, Cameron Love, Reese Presley, Liam Leone, Charlotte Cregan, Leah Rose Sebastianis, Sam Ralston, Alexander Oliver, and Lauren Taylor star in the slasher film. I don't know why my nose is whistling. I don't know if it's picking up on the audio, but it's really annoying. We reviewed this film a little while ago. Now, I understand there was a lot of buzz before it came out, and since, it seems to be incredibly divisive. A lot of people seem to hate this film. I don't know if it's because they didn't... Well, it's obviously down to personal preference and, you know, whether you like something or not. But I don't know if people went into it not knowing the setup. A lot of people seem to have a problem with the walking aspect. And I think I didn't, because I knew going into it the film was predominantly from the perspective. It's not POV, but we're following behind the character of Johnny. So I expected that. And because of that, I did quite enjoy it. Now, when I say enjoy, there are some really gnarly deaths in this that are just grotesque and just horrifying, quite frankly. But for the most part, I think it succeeded. And yeah, it is the closest thing to a new Friday the 13th movie. Ambient horror, I dug it. The finale, there's like a bit of an epilogue thing, which just went on too long. I don't know. That didn't really click with me. But overall, I enjoyed that. So if you haven't seen it and you have Shudder, or you fancy picking up a Shudder free trial, In a Violent Nature is worth a watch. But just know there's a lot of walking. You may not like it. I apparently I like following killers' treks. I don't know. Anyway, next up, after failing to make a splash at the box office just a few weeks ago, Lionsgate's The Crow, starring Bill Skarsgård, has been released on PVOD at home beginning today. It's now available to buy for $24.99 and to rent from $19.99 for a 48-hour period on participating digital platforms from which movies are purchased. Based on the iconic graphic novel, The Crow tells the dark love story of Eric and Shelley, and the lengths one will go for someone they love. Directed by Rupert Sanders, The Crow stars Bill Skarsgård, FKA Twigs, and Danny Houston. Soulmates Eric and Shelley are brutally murdered when the demons of their dark past catch up with them. Given the chance to save his true love by sacrificing himself, Eric sets out to seek merciless revenge on their killers, traversing the worlds of the living and the dead to put the things right. I mean, I didn't ever really have much interest in watching this, and that's not because I'm like a die-hard fan of the original. I enjoyed the original film. But it wasn't like a Matrix type film for me. It didn't, or like Halloween, the thing. Yeah. Point being, it wasn't one of those films that when I watched it just went, a light bulb clicked on and, oh my God, this is going to become my whole personality. Which sounds incredibly derivative, but my point being, I'm not that attached to it. It's fine. I like the history behind it. You know, it's got a very tragic history in regards to Brandon Lee. But as a film, it's fine. It's pretty, got some great, cinematography, whatever. But a remake coming out with Bill Skarsgård, like, I thought the trailers looked different enough. I think it's probably wise not going with trying to replicate the look of the original, which is what happened in each of the sequels. to my knowledge, the sequels aren't the same character from the first film. There are other people that have been killed. I don't know. Never seen the sequels. Never saw the TV series. But the look of this, it looked quite polished. It looked like the sort of film, kind of similar to the director's previous work in Ghost in the Shell, that when it lands on Netflix or somewhere, I'll watch it. I'm not, and I love going to the cinema. I wasn't that interested to spend the money to watch this, and unfortunately, it seems as though that has been the general consensus all around, which is unfortunate. But maybe it will find its new life on home media. Who knows? Next up, writer and director Mary Dauterman's feature directorial debut, Booger, promises to take audiences on a grossly sweet journey. It's now available on VOD outlets from Dark Sky Films. After Booger, her dead friend's cat runs away. Anna grows... Okay, so Booger's the name of the dead friend's cat. Wasn't made clear. Poor grammar. Anna grows desperate to find him, ignoring the fact that her life and body are totally falling apart. A psychedelic, grotesque, and unexpectedly funny film about grief and the indescribable deepness of female friendships. Booger offers a shocking mix of genres with confidence and profound emotional impact. Booger is a disgusting comedy about grief, or a body horror that's funny and sad, or a tragedy that makes you laugh and squirm, says writer-director Dauterman on her film. It's the nuanced story I wanted to tell about the joys of friendship, the pain of loss, and the dizzying search back to your centre after a crisis. Garrick Bernard, Marcia de Bonis, Sophia Dobrushin, and cult film and horror favourite Heather Matarazzo, welcome to the Dollhouse and Scream, star alongside Glowicki. I'm not seeing the trailer for it. I'm going to be honest, the setup there does not grab my attention too much at all, to be honest. Not to be too disparaging, but not for me. Not for me. Let's scroll down. So, this is one I am interested to watch. The buzz does seem to be that the film may be better than the trailers, because the trailers become a bit of a meme in of themselves, in that they've been getting shown in the cinema for months, it seems. But the bone-chilling Danish horror movie Speak No Evil gets a remake in the States, courtesy of Blumhouse and Universal, and it's now playing exclusively in movie theatres. James Watkins is directing Speak No Evil for Blumhouse. James Watkins also did Eden Lake, which is traumatizing, with Mackenzie Davis and James McAvoy set to star. Scott McNairy will also star. In the remake, when an American family is invited to spend the weekend at the idyllic country estate of a charming British family they befriended on vacation, what begins as a dream holiday soon warps into a snarled psychological nightmare. James Watkins wrote the script for the Speak No Evil remake. So yeah, the trailer has been getting shown a lot in the cinema. Almost to the point of people saying, I just want the film to come out now so I don't have to keep seeing the trailer. Now, I have heard that apparently the film is actually surprisingly decent. Now, the reason it's surprisingly decent is because the original has only come out like 2 years ago. Yeah, 2 years ago. And it's very good. It is. There are moments where you're just banging your head against the wall saying, just get out the house, because things are so weird. So weird. I don't know what the trailers were like for Speak No Evil. I went into it knowing basically nothing. I watched it on Shudder as a new film on there at the time after reading about it in the news, the horror news, and so I was pretty blind to it. So I don't know if their trailers revealed quite as much as the US remake does. The US remake does seem to make very clear straight off the bat what's going to be happening. Whether this goes to the same levels and has the same sort of finale as the original, I'm not sure. The fact James Watkins is directing, and if you've seen Eden Lake, then you'll maybe have an idea. Then it's quite possible that we'll have the same finale. You don't get that often in American cinema, but who knows? Who knows? Oh shit, and next up is a film we're going to be reviewing a bit later on. The director and star of the Better Than Expected Till Death are back together again for Subservience, with Megan Fox starring as a lifelike artificial intelligent android. Director S.K. Dale's AI thriller, which looks like a mix between thriller, Fatal Attraction, and horror movie Megan, is now available on VOD outlets from XYZ Films. A trailer is available now, starring Fox. Fox stars as Alice, a lifelike artificial intelligent android who has the ability to take care of any family and home. Looking for help with the household, a struggling father purchases Alice after his wife becomes sick. Alice suddenly becomes self-aware and wants everything her new family has to offer, starting with the affection of her owner, and she'll kill to get it. Whatever you do, don't turn her on. Madeline Zima, Antanos Srebrev, Andrew Whipp, Matilda Firth, and Kate Nichols also star with Michelle Morone and Megan Fox. I won't say too much more because we have a review of that later on, but that is out now. Next up, the first title to launch the Weekly World News IP-driven studio slate of movie projects is The Zombie Wedding, and Freestyle Digital Media brings it to VOD outlets today. I don't really understand what all of that meant. The Zombie Wedding tells the story of what happens when a young New Jersey couple decides to go through with their dream wedding during the zombie apocalypse. Unfortunately, the bride is a human and the groom is a zombie. Both families are fearful, but the human's behaviour is downright beastly. When the zombies become brain deprived, the ceremony takes a turn for the weird. Weekly World News reporters cover this wild, wacky wedding while trying to get out alive. Written by Greg D'Alessandro, The Zombie Wedding was directed by Micah Khan and produced by D'Alessandro, Joe Cochran, Sue Wolf, Maria Kapp, and Jeff Mazzola. Yeah, I mean, okay. I don't really understand any of that. The Zombie Wedding features a large ensemble cast that includes Sherry Ateri, Seth Gilliam, Heather Matarazzo, Kevin Chamberlain, Siobhan Fallon Hogan, Vincent Pastore, AJ Nadir, Mickey Delands of The Monkey, Jesus, okay, featuring Deputy Menon and Donald Chang as the bride and groom. Okay, I don't really understand what Weekly World News is. IP-driven studio slate of movie projects. Okay, I guess it's a new film that's come out. I don't know. I don't know to be curt. Next up, Brainstorm Media has released writer-director Sheldon Wilson's high-concept sci-fi feature Believer today. Film now available on VOD outlets as well as in select theatres. In Believer, a young writer is attacked by a notorious cult leader and mass murderer, a man who exerts inexplicable control over his followers. When she claims no memory of the attack, her family begins to question her motives. Lauren Lee Smith, Ella Ballantyne, Peter Mooney, Martin Roach, Ian... Spells funny. Ian O'Driscoll, Jonathan Potts, and Chris Holden Reed star. Sheldon previously helmed horror movies Night Class, which I think I've seen, Shallow Ground, which I think I've seen, Screamers, The Hunting, don't know, Shark Killer, don't know, and The Unspoken, not sure. Okay, I mean, the setup of that cult leader, yeah, okay, that's got my attention. I like a good cult horror film, a good cult leader horror film. Funnily enough, the other second sight film I picked up recently was The Sacrament. That's the Jamestown Massacre, basically. Very good. But yeah, Believer is out now. And then finally for the new films, the third film in the Fresh Hell Presents trilogy from Cranked Up Films, following in the wake of The Exorcism, St. Patrick, and Wolves Against the World, is titled Dead Teenagers. The meta-slasher movie is now available on VOD outlets. In the film, 5 teenagers are stalked by a killer in the woods. But when the killer accidentally dies, the kids discover they cannot leave until they fulfill the script of the movie they're trapped in. They must decide who among them lives and dies. Dead Teenagers is written and directed by Quinn Armstrong. Okay, so the poster artwork that I'm seeing on screen for the trailer does give me an idea of the type of quality of film. This may be a little bit derivative, but you know, you calls it as you sees it. The setup sounds kind of interesting enough, going into a film within a film, kind of similar to Final Girls, although this seems to be they're stumbling upon this scenario as opposed to knowing that they are going into a film. Okay, yeah, again, if this appears on Prime, I imagine, Freevee, potentially, maybe Tubi, which I check out occasionally. I may give it a watch. Nothing kind of strikes me too much with that. So we'll move on. Don't know what is going on with Chrome. It seems to be a bit unresponsive. So next up, the Salem's Lot trailer is finally available. Right up from John Squires. The long-awaited movie adaptation of Stephen King's Salem's Lot from director Gary Doberman is coming exclusively to Max this Halloween season. It premieres on Max on October 3rd, 2024, so I don't know when or if we will get this in the UK. Max is normally associated with Sky, Sky Max, Sky Sci-Fi. So we shall see. Stephen King had recently tweeted praise for the film. He wrote earlier this year, "I've seen the new Salem's Lot and it's quite good. Old school horror filmmaking, slow build, big payoff. Not sure why Warner Brothers is holding it back. Not like it's embarrassing or anything." Salem's Lot 2024 is set circa 1975 when King's book was first published. In Salem's Lot 2024, haunted by an incident from his childhood, author Ben Mears returns to his hometown of Jerusalem's Lot in search of inspiration for his next book, only to discover the town is being preyed upon by a bloodthirsty vampire and his loyal servant. The cast includes Lewis Pullman, Mackenzie Lee, Alfred Woodard, Bill Camp, John Benjamin Hickey, Nicholas Cravetti, John Preston Carter, William Sadler, so that's the first one I've heard of, Spencer Treat Clark, Cade Woodward, Deborah Christopherson, and Pilar Aspect. Okay, so, and I'll just mention a bit further on, fresh off Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Tobe Hooper directed the very first adaptation of Salem's Lot back in 1979, and a new miniseries followed in its wake more recently, 2004, starring Rob Lowe. Now, I appear to be in the minority that actually quite enjoyed the 2004 miniseries. Yes, it's not 100% faithful to the book. There's a fair few liberties taken. Quite a few liberties taken, especially with the wraparound story. But I liked it. I thought it was pretty decent in terms of especially, early 2000s era of Stephen King adaptations. Didn't have the best track record. But I'm quite excited for this. I mean, Salem's Lot is a book that I do need to revisit at some point. I really enjoyed it, and whilst I've read a couple, I've read and reread a couple of times, and even The Stand I've reread, and I'm not actually that fussed with The Stand. Salem's Lot does deserve a reread. It is a very nice vampire infestation novel. It's definitely worth a go. I haven't had a chance yet to watch this trailer, but it's one that I am looking forward to watching. I'm kind of tempted to actually just avoid the trailer and wait for the film and just watch it. Yeah, I might do that actually. Sometimes it's best to just keep clear. Let's kind of just skip through a few of these. Okay. Damien Bichir joins the cast of The Black Phone 2. Universal and Blumhouse, this is from John Squires, as per most of them. Universal and Blumhouse will release The Black Phone 2 in theatres October 17th, 2025, and Deadline reports today that Damien Bichir of The Nun has joined the cast. Scott Derrickson and C. Robert Cargill will be writing and producing the upcoming sequel, with Derrickson directing. The first movie was based on Joe Hill's short story. Ethan Hawke will be back as the Grabber, with Mason Thames, Madeline McGraw, Jeremy Davies, and Miguel Mora also set to return. In the first film, Finney, a shy but clever 13-year-old boy, is abducted by a sadistic killer and trapped in the soundproof basement where screaming is of little use. When a disconnected phone on the wall begins to ring, Finney discovers that he can hear the voices of the killer's previous victims, and they are dead set on making sure that what happens to them doesn't happen to Finney. The film was produced by Derrickson and Cargill's Crooked Highway and presented by Universal and Blumhouse. The Black Phone's pretty good. I mean, for me, it's a solid 7 out of 10. It's not bad at all. It's not amazing. It didn't blow me away, but I did really enjoy it. It's a nice little horror-tinged thriller. Ethan Hawke is great in it. The kids are great in it. Nice little story. And I think for me, my only concern here is what is the story this time around. Purely because it felt like the original, the first film, had a succinct start and end. I didn't anticipate it needing a sequel. That being said, if everyone's returning, maybe there's a good story, or maybe the money's good. Not sure. I'm happy to be surprised, but I am a little bit like, why? Why? But then I guess the look of the masks in the Black Phone became instantly quite iconic, and I guess you could look at that and go, well, we can make a franchise out of these masks. It's franchisable, but I just feel how the first film ended, I'm not sure how you continue that. And then the final bit of news we got: director's cut, a punk band's music video shoot turns deadly. Right up from Brad Miska. A righteous slasher throwback that pays tribute to horror cinema of the 80s and 90s. Okay, you've got my attention. Director's Cut opens in select theatres this October 31st before arriving on VOD at a later date. Director's Cut is from filmmaker Don Capria, stars celebrated character actor Louis Lombardi as a mysterious, murderous sociopath preying on a punk band's desperate desire for fame. In the film, a Long Island punk band meets a mysterious director through social media who generously offers to shoot their first music video for free. Desperate for fame, they drive deep into the Pennsylvania woods in hopes of making a killer music video. But after a long night of drinking with the gregarious director, the band wakes up to find a very different version of him on set. Egos and opinions clash with the director, unveiling a terrible anger and uncompromising need for total control. As his professionalism breaks down, so does his sanity, with the unhinged director and his assistant turning the band's members into unwitting stars of his very own snuff film. Written and directed by Don Capria, the film stars Louis Lombardi, Lucy Hart, Danielle Koch, Tyler Ivey, Haley Casti, Louis Rocky Bakigalupa, Brandy Ocher, Greg Popper, and Darren Hickok. I like the sound of that. I do like the sound of that. And the artwork has a very sort of kitsch, 80s underground of very early 90s, kind of tacky, but on purpose look. Yeah, okay. Okay, you've got my interest. One of the few new film announcements that has definitely grabbed my interest. And I quite like the setup of punk band, rock band, metal band, chasing fame in the wrong place. I mean, Green Room is incredible. Green Room is definitely one to check out. I probably need to get a copy of that at some point because I haven't seen that in a long time. I like that style, so I'm going to give it a go. At some point. Anyway, that brings us rapidly to the end of the horror news. That was the news. Oh, ho, ho, ho.
You hang up on me again, I'll cut you like a fish, understand?
Now it's time for reviews. And first up in the reviews, as mentioned at the top of the show, the new Megan Fox thriller, sexy AI thriller, is Subservience. Subservience is being released as of today, directed by S.K. Dale, I believe, also written by Will Honley and April Maguire. The film stars Megan Fox, Michelle Morone, Madeline Zima. Now, as per usual, I'm going to talk about the synopsis. Going to talk about the highs, the lows, my general feelings on the film, and then I'm going to give it a score out of 10. So, a struggling father, played by Michelle Morone, buys a domestic AI to help run the household. The situation soon turns deadly when the lifelike robot develops an obsessive attachment to her new owner. Driven by a twisted sense of loyalty, she becomes determined to eliminate what she perceives as the true threat to his happiness, his family. So it does kind of feel like you could read that and go, okay, a bit kind of Megan-esque to an extent, because obviously it's being AI that runs amok. I mean, that's nothing new. We've had Skynet famously in the Terminator franchise. But this is quite a slick film. Megan Fox performing as Alice, I believe her name is. Let me just scroll through this. The domesticated AI. I think it said Alice. Her role of kind of just being this initially, I'm very calm, very serene, very robotic, and performance as the robot to begin with, the AI, I should say, as opposed to robot. But we're in a near future where not everything is super slick and high tech. The houses look like the houses we live in now. But we've got to a point where we can basically have what's called sparks, is the sort of derogatory term for AI. They're used in the service industry. They're used for like household maintenance, various things. And obviously you can imagine some seedy individuals would use them for seedy means. But this guy, his wife has gone ill and he is struggling with work, but he's got a young daughter and a baby boy. So he gets in Alice. Now, he makes a fatal mistake early on in that when watching a film, he's a big film fan, he's trying to unwind, very stressful with work. He says to her, this is one of those films that, you know, everyone should be able to just kind of turn their brain off and watch it for the first time, just to experience it for the first time. And that's a feeling I think all of us have had with certain films where we've watched it and gone, wow, I would love to be able to just experience that for a first time again. But she has a full database as an AI and goes, I'm unable to do that. But there is a way you can kind of reset my inhibitors so I can erase parts of my memory banks, essentially. So he does that. But what that does is that eliminates certain inhibitors, so she can then start not so much gaining feelings, but gaining ideas. And this is when things start taking a increasingly direct approach. This is a taunt thriller. It builds. She has grown this attachment, as mentioned, to the man of the household. But there's a lot of struggles he's going on with work, with quite a volatile member of his team at work. Things are going to start coming to a head, and Alice decides to take some actions into her own hands. I think everyone in this performs to a pretty high standard. In terms of music, the score in this is not distracting, but nothing stood out too much with the score. Like, there weren't certain key motifs that I thought, oh, okay, that's like a key theme to this. And I think that's something you find with a lot of modern films. I think I'm probably more noticing it where I've been watching Lucia Fulci, Dario Argento films recently. John Carpenter, of course, where the score is quite a key part of the film and the moods and the tone. In this, the score's fine. Doesn't really stand out is the main point. There aren't really any negatives. I certainly was surprised by how engaged I was with this. I really think Megan Fox hasn't had too many big roles as of recently, to my knowledge. I haven't really followed her career, but I remember she sort of hit the big time. Transformers films, Jennifer's Body, but I hear about her more via the headlines these days for whatever's going on there, as opposed to her films. This, depending on the sort of the widespreadness of its release, could kind of put her back out there, I think. It's a pretty good performance all round. I didn't really know any of the other cast, to be fair, but everyone did their job to a pretty good standard, really. I think in terms of a taut, sexy sci-fi thriller, it does its job. 7 out of 10. I'd definitely recommend this. Apologies for the dogs in the background. I decided to record around their usual dinner time, but they're going to have to wait. They've all had a little treat, so they should be quiet. I'm assuming actually someone's come to the front door now that the dogs are kicking off. Typical. So 7 out of 10 for Subservience. Next up, Hellraiser Bloodline. Yep. Someone's at the front door. I don't know who. Delivery, probably. Hellraiser Bloodline. Hellraiser Part 4. Hellraiser in Space. So, I wanted to watch a retro film in the week. I was starting to get my kind of work-based burnout. And I just kind of felt like I want to watch one of the sequels to a franchise that I haven't really watched recently. And I've only seen this the once, many, many years ago. And I wasn't that fussed with it, to be honest. So I put it out to the Discord and to Twitter. Tonight, Hellraiser Bloodline or Bride of Chucky. You know, part 4 of both entries, both series. And this one won. This one got a heavy endorsement from Matt Wyatt. So I figured, hey, let's give it a go. Now, not long ago, when I'd got the Hellraiser Quartet of Torment box set, I'd rewatched the original film, and I was surprised at how good it was, because I'd always remembered thinking, yeah, it's fine. It just takes a while to build up to the finale, and then the effects are a bit hokey. Second one is my favourite. And similarly with the third film, I always felt, oh, this is where Hellraiser goes Hollywood. It's just not really the same. Third one's a lot of fun, actually. It loses the Britishness of the first two films, but it's a lot of fun. And Hellraiser 4, I think it's because I'm never really that fussed with going back into like aristocratic times or period pieces. I don't know what it is. I've just never been that interested in period piece films. And I always remember thinking that this, for the majority of this, is a period piece. It's not really. The opening third is a period piece. The majority of it is set kind of in 1996. But Hellraiser Bloodline is an American science fiction horror film from 1996. Fourth film in the series, serves as both a prequel and a sequel. Directed by Kevin Yeager and Joe Chappelle, the film stars Doug Bradley as Pinhead, reprising his role and now the only remaining original character and cast member. It also features Bruce Ramsey, Valentina Vargas, Kim Myers, and Adam Scott in his first major role. It was the last Hellraiser film to be released theatrically and the last to have any major official involvement with the series creator Clive Barker until the 2022 reboot. In the 18th century, celebrated toy maker is hired to create his greatest work, the Lament Configuration, not knowing that it will allow the summoning of the demonic Cenobites, including Pinhead and Angelique. Hundreds of years in the future, the toy maker's descendant, also played by Ramsey, an engineer, has designed a space station that he believes can trap and destroy the Cenobites. Major themes include time, toys and game playing, adultery, and slavery. The film had a troubled history, and after completing the film, original director Yeager left the production when distributor Miramax demanded new scenes be shot. It was subsequently completed by Chappelle. The new scenes and reshoots changed several characters' relationships, gave the film a happy ending, introduced Pinhead earlier, and cut 25 minutes. Yeager felt the changes diverged too strongly from his vision and was granted the Alan Smithy pseudonym, an alias used by directors who want to go uncredited. So, I still need to watch the work print copy. I believe the work print copy is in my Quartet of Torment. So that would be essentially like the director's cut. I need to give that a watch. But I watched this early this week. I think Tuesday, maybe Wednesday. I think Tuesday. And it is a lot better than I remember. The time jumps make a lot more sense. I think it may have been one of those films that I put on in a bit of a scoffing mood, in a bit of a okay, because back in the day I wasn't that fussed with the Hellraiser series in general, and I probably thought, okay, well, the sci-fi looks kind of corny. It looks very 90s sci-fi. You know, like a lower level Event Horizon. Event Horizon's great, but imagine a TV production version of that. That's how I think I would have initially felt watching this. But it's actually pretty effective. The moments in the past where we basically get to see why the Lament configuration is what it is do make a lot of sense. Like, why is this box, this device portal to hell? Well, it was used as a device in line with a ritual to bring forth a demon. And the demon basically became a sex slave for an individual who thought that he was in complete control before forgetting one of the key rules, that you cannot stand in the way of hell or the progress of hell. And that's where we get Adam Scott in a very early role, which is pretty Funny. Best known for like Step Brothers and Parks and Recreations. performances, I think are pretty good. They range a bit from corny to decent. I think Ramsey's fine in this. Pinhead's brilliant. Angelique is a really good addition to the Cenobites. It's kind of a shame that the sequels went the way they did. I'm not really in a mood to watch all the sequels. I've watched a couple of the later ones and they just did not enjoy them at all. At all. I'm not going to watch them again. So we get some new Cenobites, obviously. Angelique's a new one. We also get these two security guard twins who have their heads melded together. That looks creepy as hell. And when they kill a space marine, for want of a better term, a bit later on, that's a pretty good kill. There's also a Cenobite dog that's like a pet to Pinhead. That's pretty gnarly. Some of the close-up shots do look a bit shitty, but it does have this really. It's basically like a dog version of the Chatterer. Pretty good. And the general story going through the various bloodlines of the Lament configuration makers make a lot of sense, actually. I think the cinematography and the set pieces are what are widely underappreciated in this. The jumps from the various set pieces of the when's the first part of it set? The late 1700s, the late 18th century. I really didn't dig the ancestral sort of home setting for a good chunk of that. Jump into 1996, this quite high-tech building that's almost like I think pretty sure it might be the building from the end of Hellraiser Part 3, Hell on Earth. And then the sci-fi setting in the future. None of it's really a weakness in this film. I think this might actually have been so surprising for me that this. I don't know what it is with the Hellraiser series. It's the sort of series that I never thought that I would just become a bigger and a bigger fan of. I kind of feel that I always felt that they're the films that I'd watch and go, yeah, okay, prefer my Michael Myers, prefer my Freddy Krueger, and then Jason, and then Leatherface. Although the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre is kind of way up there. But in terms of just looking at series as a whole. But rewatching 3 a little while ago and now rewatching 4, they really jump up in my estimations of them. And maybe I do need to do a full series rewatch and do a rankings list, maybe. I'm not sure. We haven't done rankings lists in a long time. Hellraiser Bloodlines. It's probably crazy. I'm going to give it a 7.5. I really, 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 really dug it. There are some pretty cool kills in it, in line with, how Hellraiser is. And I did quite like developing that story. I mean, you could say there's a missed trick with maybe how the box gets to Doug Bradley's character when he becomes Pinhead. But I guess we have covered that story in 2 and to a greater extent in 3, so we don't really need to cover that again. So I don't really have a complaint on that. I'm going to give Hellraiser Bloodline 7.5. We're now going to jump to a more modern remake, although it's 2009, so it's pretty old now. 15 years old. The Friday the 13th remake from 2009. So I just fancied giving this a rewatch, to be honest. I do enjoy the remake to an extent. I just fancied giving it a rewatch, so I figured, hey, let's, the show's going to be on Friday the 13th. Let's discuss it on Friday the 13th. So 2009 American slasher film directed by Marcus Nispel and written by Damien Shannon and Mark Swift. From a story by Shannon, Swift and Mark Wheaton. It's the 12th installment of the Friday the 13th franchise, and it stars Jared Padalecki, Danielle Panabaker, Aaron Yu, Amanda Rigetti, Travis Van Winkle, and Derek Mears. It follows Clay Miller as he searches for his missing sister Whitney, who is captured by Jason Voorhees while camping in Woodland at Crystal Lake. The film was originally conceived as an origin story, but the project evolved into a reimagining of the first 4 Friday the 13th films. Voorhees was redesigned as a lean, quick killer with a backstory that allows the viewer to feel sympathy for him, but not enough that he would lose his menace. In keeping with the tone of the film, Jason's mask was recreated from a mold of the original mask used for Friday the 13th Part 3, with minor changes. The film includes some of Harry Manfredi's musical score from the previous Friday the 13th films because the producers recognized its iconic status. I mean, it got negative reviews, but it was a decent box office on a budget of 19 million. It made 92. But we'll talk a bit about the plot. Friday the 13th, June 13th, 1980, a young Jason Voorhees watches as his mother Pamela is beheaded by a camp counselor who is trying to escape Mrs. Voorhees' murder spree and around Camp Crystal Lake. Almost 30 years later, 5 friends, Wade, Richie, his girlfriend Amanda, Mike, and his girlfriend Whitney, arrive for a camping trip at Crystal Lake where they hope to find a crop of marijuana growing in the woods. That night, an adult Jason kills everyone except Whitney, whom he captures as she resembles his mother at a young age. 6 weeks later, Trent, his girlfriend Jenna, and friends Chelsea, Bree, Chewie, Nolan, and Lawrence arrive at Trent's summer cabin on the shore of Crystal Lake. Meanwhile, Whitney's brother, Clay Miller, arrives at the lake in search of her, despite his local sheriff's pleas to look elsewhere. Clay visits Trent's cabin, and Jenna agrees to help him search for Whitney. Chelsea and Nolan go wakeboarding on the lake, where Jason kills Nolan with an arrow and fatally stabs Chelsea with a machete. So, we've got into the kills, or the start of the kills here. Now, yes, it is basically adapting in a roundabout way the first 4 films, and I think that's probably a wise decision because at this stage, you couldn't really do a remake of Friday the 13th, the original, because Friday the 13th is so synonymous with Jason, who only has a cameo in the first film. And the iconic mask he only gets in the third film. So it's a wise decision, I think, to open with a kind of prologue of the finale of the first film, like a reimagining of the finale of the first film, because we don't need to cover old ground again. And then jumping forward into Friday the 13th Part 2 territory with the baghead mask before he finds the iconic hockey mask. The kills in this are decent. And Derek Mears as the new Jason, fine. I mean, I've mentioned in the past that I'm not that observant to the various different actors playing Jason to notice the various nuances. Like, we'll talk a bit about it later on, but Kane Hodder is the most well-known Jason, but is arguably in the worst Jason films. So that's something I can't really get my head around personally. I mean, when it comes to the Friday the 13th film, we can't really talk too much about the characters and the protagonists because outside of Tommy Jarvis, they are quite rinse and repeat and quite cookie cutter. You got your typical jock dickheads, the people that are having sex are definitely going to die. Those are the hallmarks of a Friday the 13th film. I think the reason why this film for me is fine, it's decent, you know, I kind of compare it with Freddy vs. Jason and that it's, you know, it's a decent watch, but it's not a favourite. I think the finale doesn't smash it out the park. I think there have been much better final standoffs. Yeah, I don't know what it was with the finale. Didn't quite clinch it for me. Good seeing Jared Padalecki in a film. He is most well known for Supernatural, and I do think at some point we should have to do a Supernatural episode. I do have a lot left to watch. I had started doing a rewatch. I'd got onto series 3, but it just is taking too long for me to do. You know, 45-minute episodes, 20 to 25 episodes a season, 15 seasons. I don't have that sort of willpower anymore to binge that sort of thing. But I would like to at some point finish it, but I feel the last season or two, I'd watch on E4 in the UK and just kind of, it started becoming like The Walking Dead for me in terms of I'm watching this out of habit more than want. And so I'd stopped watching a couple of seasons before the end. I feel I've got to season 11 or 12, maybe. But the Men of Letters became quite heavily featured, and I'm not really that interested in the whole Men of Letters storyline. Anyway, I'm diverting a bit here. But the remake is It's fine. It's not as much of a standout as Marcus Nispel's Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, which I did think was really good. That had moments of genuine scares in it. There's not really creepy. And the storyline of Jason kidnapping a girl is a bit different. I don't necessarily think it's in line with his traditional character. Could be wrong. Someone can tell me who's a bit more of a Friday fanatic. But yeah, I think with the remake, it's a decent popcorn horror slasher. It doesn't do too much new. It's a 6 out of 10 for the remake for me. Moving on. Now, I mentioned I've watched some, for me, lesser watched Friday the 13th films. We've got 2 more we're going to go through. So I kind of figured I want to watch some Friday the 13th. But I've rewatched part 4 not long ago. I love part 6. That is my favourite by a country mile. Jason Lives. I just think it's so fun, so good. Got some cool kills in it. The whole setup of how Jason comes back I thought was brilliant. It's the film that part 5 should have been, arguably. And that's what I rewatched because I hated this the first time I watched it. Friday the 13th part 5. So if you're a long-time listener of the show, you'll know that a lot of my horror film development came from what was the original Sci-Fi channel on Sky when it was called SCI-FI. That's where I saw tons of horror films that I grew to love. The Thing, Ginger Snaps, a lot of the Nightmare on Elm Street sequels. It was a good point, a good place to see horror sequels. I saw a few of the Children of the Corn sequels there. They're all quite terrible, but I saw them there. It's not a good franchise. I'm sorry. In my opinion, it's not very good. But it's also where I saw the majority of the Friday the 13th films for the first time. Now, back in those days, I don't think Wikipedia was around. The internet was fairly new. Really aging myself here. But I didn't have the resources to do what I do now when there's a new horror film. Well, let's check out what other works the director's done if it's connected to a series. It's very easy to do. Wikipedia, Bloody Disgusting, wherever. So I didn't really know too much about the series. I didn't grow up young watching it. So I'd seen 1 to 4, then seeing part 5, A New Beginning, 1985, American slasher film directed by Dari Steinman and starring Melanie Kinnaman, John Shepard, and Shavar Ross. It does have a cameo appearance by Corey Feldman, who portrayed Tommy in the previous film. So initially I was thinking, oh, cool, we've got a returning actor here, Corey Feldman, big star. But whether he couldn't return for whatever reason, scheduling conflict, or whether they just wanted to age him up for the setting, because this film was made a year after the final chapter, shock horror. But we have a different Tommy. Tommy Jarvis is now played by John Shepard. I'm going to talk about my reevaluation feeling on the film, but he's not very good. He's still not very good. I think it's great for the series that he didn't return to play Tommy Jarvis in the sequel. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't think John Shepard was a great portrayal. I understand it that he's lived through a horrific incident which has given him serious PTSD. But he wasn't very good. He wasn't very good. So, set years after the events of the previous film, the story follows a teenage Tommy Jarvis who is institutionalized at a halfway house near Crystal Lake because of nightmares of mass murderer Jason Voorhees, whom he killed as a child. Tommy must face his fears when a new hockey mask-wearing murderer initiates another violent killing spree in the area. New Beginning features a high number of on-screen murders. Aside from its gore and violence, the film has also become known for its explicit nudity, sex scenes, and numerous depictions of illicit drug use. So let's just have a little look at production. If it mentioned about Corey Feldman. So Corey Feldman was only able to make a cameo appearance in the film as a result of his involvement as an actor in The Goonies, which was released the same year as A New Beginning. Feldman filmed the inserts of his cameo on a Sunday, as that was his off day of shooting his other film, and the footage was shot in the backyard of his family's home in Los Angeles with a rain machine. Okay, so it's a scheduling thing. I mean, that was a shame, but then I guess he was still a kid, and that would have probably affected a lot of what you're able to then do in terms of ramping up the action in this film. Okay, so 5 years after killing Jason Voorhees in Part 4, a teenage Johnny Tommy Jarvis is tormented by nightmares of the mass murderer, resulting in his internment in numerous psychiatric hospitals. He's eventually transferred to the Pinehurst halfway house, managed by Dr. Matt Letta and his assistant Pam Roberts. There, Tommy meets a circle of other teens, including lovers Eddie and Tina, the stutterer Jake, punk rocker Violet, the serious Robin, the compulsive eater Joey, and the young Reggie, whose grandfather George works as the facility's cook. The group is disliked by their neighbour Ethel, as Eddie and Tina have made a habit of engaging in sexual intercourse on her property. For this reason, Matt forbids the group from venturing outside the facility's premises. Vic, another patient at the institute, is gripped by a fit of madness caused by Joey's constant pestering and brutally kills him with an axe, leading to his arrest. That evening, two greasers, Vinny and Pete, are murdered by an unseen assailant after their car breaks down, and a diner waitress and her boyfriend are killed the following night. The sheriff hypothesizes that Jason Voorhees has come back to life and is the perpetrator of these murders, while Tommy himself is rendered a suspicious party. Okay, so that is the general setup for this film, and the highlight of this film is both a mixture of the kills, which the kills are great in this. That's one of those things that I'd completely forgotten about. But not only the kills, I'm just looking at my notes on my phone, but the music. The score in this and the soundtrack in places is really actually pretty good. I know why I disliked it massively, but in that dislike, I'd forgotten a lot of the highlights that occur in this film. It has some pretty damn cool kills. I think one of the standouts in terms of visuals is I think it's the couple that are banging in the woods. The guy finds his girlfriend has been brutally murdered, and he backs away to a tree where he is grabbed and a belt is whipped around the tree around his eyes, and Jason behind the tree has taken that belt, put a stick through the loop, and is using that to tighten it. And you get this crazy visual of the belt just pulling in and tearing into this guy's eyes. You don't see the eyes, but the visual, it's like a blindfold that's ripping into his head to the point that the stick breaks. That was a pretty cool kill. The set pieces in the finale in the barn are pretty tense, pretty exciting. The only letdown, as I say, is Tommy. Unfortunately, he's an iconic character. He's pretty much the Laurie Strode of the Friday franchise. But and it's weird that we've never had a return in any of the I mean, the series has kind of gone off kilter and we haven't had a new film in a long time. But I'd imagine if we were to get a new film, we'd have to have a Tommy character back. You'd have to think. But the finale in the barn has some really cool moments, but it is let down a bit by his acting. And it does bring me to the reason why I disliked this film for a long time, and that is the finale. The finale is shite. The reveal of who the killer is pretty good. It makes sense. I mean, sure, it's not Jason, but I kind of liked the fact that he is dead, he has been killed, he has been buried. It makes total sense for why we get the setup for part 6, in terms of these nightmares going to the graveyard to make sure that he is dead. That makes total sense. So someone having a psychotic break, committing these murders and taking on the guise of Jason, that also makes sense. Someone having a psychotic break, and then this is the site where there's previously been a mass murderer. I'll dress up like them. Okay, I get it. I understand. But it's the finale in the hospital with Tommy and the crap acting of this film's Tommy that does kill the film a bit for me. But I have reevaluated my feelings on it because it does have some great kills. It does have some great music. The guy um, playing Jason in this, again, I don't really take too much note of him. It's Tom Morga. Okay, cool. Yeah. I mean, all the Jasons seem the same to me. I don't pick up on the nuances, but he was good. And the rest of the cast, Melanie as Pam, Roberts, Reggie, Matt, they're pretty good. It was just John Shepherd as Tommy. Wasn't a fan. Wasn't a fan. I'm going to give, and I was very surprised before watching this film that I'd ever give this film the score. I'm going to give it 6.5. It's got some great kills. If you haven't seen this for a long time because you remember hating it, and that could be because of hating it due to the finale, give it a rewatch. The finale is crap, but the film itself isn't as bad as I remembered it. 6.5 out of 10. Now, the other film that I remember not disliking as much, but I remember thinking, what the fuck is going on here, was 1988's Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood. 1988 American supernatural slasher film directed by John Carl Buchan, starring Lar Park Lincoln, Kevin Blair, Susan Blue, Terry Kaiser, and Kane Hodder in his first appearance as Jason Voorhees, a role he would reprise in 3 subsequent films. It's a sequel to Part 6, Jason Lives, and the 7th installment in the franchise. Set 7 years after the events of the previous film, the plot follows a psychokinetic teenage girl who unwittingly releases Jason from his tomb at the bottom of Crystal Lake, allowing him to go on another killing spree in the area. The New Blood was intended to have a higher standard of quality than that of the previous installments, with high-profile directors being considered to helm the project. Paramount Pictures sought a partnership with New Line Cinema to create a crossover film between the Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street series, which would not come to fruition until New Line brought the rights to the franchise, resulting in Freddy vs. Jason 2003. After several failed concepts, screenwriter Daryl Haney suggested an idea akin to Jason vs. Carrie, in which Jason would battle a teenage girl with psychokinetic abilities. Yeah. And that's kind of the crux of why I remember not really liking it that much. I need to just double check. When did Halloween 5 come out? 1989. Okay, interesting. I'd wondered if that had been an influence on this, because it felt as though these later entries in the series, there seemed to be this whole, and I think even with was it Part 5 of Nightmare on Elm Street, there was this subplot of, telekinetic link and psychokinetic abilities, and just taking things in that, not even really that kind of sci-fi realm, because we're dealing with a zombie Jason now, but just the kind of telekinesis, telekinetic link, all that stuff. I don't know why that seemed to be in vogue. I mean, Carrie came out like a decade earlier than these films, and the book was, obviously earlier, but it was an idea. But yeah, let's read a bit of the plot. So after witnessing her alcoholic father physically abusing her mother, a young Tina Shepherd attempts to escape the chaos at home and heads out onto Crystal Lake in a boat. When her father follows her in an attempt to stop her, Tina's dormant telekinetic abilities emerge and she accidentally destroys the dock her father is standing on, causing him to fall into the lake and drown. Years later, a teenage Tina is still struggling with remorse surrounding her father's death. Her mother, Amanda, takes her to the same lakeside residence as part of her treatment from her psychiatrist, Dr. Cruz. He begins a series of experiments, verbal assaults, designed to agitate Tina's mental state, forcing her powers to become more pronounced. In reality, he is only trying to exploit her psychic powers. After a particularly upsetting session with Dr. Cruz, Tina runs from the cabin and to the dock thinking about her father's death. While thinking about him, she wishes he could come back. Her powers unwittingly awaken mass murderer Jason Voorhees, who is chained at the bottom of Crystal Lake at the end of Part 6, and he emerges from the water to commit another killing spree. So, this has got some pretty decent kills in it, but I don't think the kills were quite as memorable as Part 5. I mean, yeah, the whole psychic telekinetic storyline, I'm still not that interested in. It's not as bad as I remember, but it's not something that interests me that much at all, to be honest. I liked the subplot storyline with her psychiatrist, because it's that typical selfish psychiatrist just exploiting the suffering teen, even to the point of unwittingly causing her mum's murder via Jason. The effects of Jason's face, well, they're a little corny. They are a little corny. His mask breaks away to show what his zombified, deformed face now looks like, and it is a little. I mean, it's never looked creepy under the mask, but it is a bit corny. The music's pretty good in this. But I always remember, because I remember hating 5 so much, I always thought this is better than 5. No. I like the idea that we're not continuing Tommy's story, just because you don't want to run down the route of kind of like a la Scream, where it's, oh, Sydney's in another scenario. And I enjoy the Scream films, but again, it's like, well, how often can someone keep entering shit before they either die or they just get a happy ending? So it does kind of go against what I said with part 5, where you'd hope that at some point Tommy may return, but either way, give him a bit of time off for now. So it was nice to take a slightly different route, but the telekinetic route, not too sure about that. Yeah, the finale's pretty good with the fire in the basement, but I certainly didn't feel it was as entertaining as part 5 had been. Surprisingly entertaining. I'm going to give Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood, 5.5 out of 10. It's decent. It's fine. It's just not great. Now, Penny is telling me I need to feed her dinner, and we've come to the end of the Ministry of Horror's latest show. Be sure to check us out on YouTube, Ministry of Horror. The podcast goes out on the podcast platforms Spotify and Apple Podcast. Search Ministry of Horror. Give us a follow on those platforms. Subscribe on YouTube. Like, share, all that stuff. It really does help the show. Twitter or X is Ministry_Horror. TikTok's Ministry of Horror. And I occasionally put horror-related things, although it's mainly dogs, on my Instagram. So my IG is Tez Elliott. Be sure to check those out for the latest news and latest updates on the show. Twitch, where we do the live streams every other week, and I occasionally do horror video game streams, or Call of Duty, which now is a horror season, is twitch.tv/Tezius, TEZZIUS. Thank you very much for watching or listening to the show. I will catch you next time. Goodbye.